All right, I'll just go quickly through because we have a lot to cover here. Now that Ajay has covered the background, we'll be moving on directly to slide where we are talking about why are medical device regulations critical? That's about the fourth slide, if I'm right. Actually, if you look at this graph here, you would see the chart here, you see that 65% of the recalls by FDA in the year 2004 to 2011 period time frame is for medical devices, and that is why ISO 13485 is so critical. And also, I want to point out that amongst the 65%, about 1/3 is related to supplier management. And we know that that's a big global problem at this point, and so we'll get into that because ISO 13485 2015 gets into a lot more rigorous requirements for supplier management. All right, moving on, I just want to say the title was put out as FDA proposed changes to ISO 13485 2015. The way it should have read is FDA and ISO 13485 2003 did propose changes to ISO 13485 2015. So the way I'm going to handle this webinar, as you would have seen from the PowerPoint, is we'll talk about the main requirements of ISO 13485, what exactly it is and who are the users. Then we'll get on to the changes that are being introduced to it through ISO 13485 2015 that would be introduced. It's still in the final voting stages and it's the draft industry standard. The final draft industry standard is still being voted and we'll get it released by the end of the year is the hope now. Okay, so I'll get into that, and then I'll get into what the U.S. FDA requirements are for medical devices and how it correlates with ISO 13485. Okay, and then we'll talk about the sources of both and the differences. Then we'll slightly touch upon other geographies, and then open it up for questions because it's your seminar, and I really want to answer most of your questions as much as we can. Otherwise, like Ajay said, we can send you email. You can send us email and we'll definitely follow through. Okay. Now moving on to the slide that is talking about ISO 13485, what exactly it is. It's an international standard. Remember, all standards are guidelines. They're not laws, okay? But they're treated as laws because in any industry, we want to make sure that everything we sell is standardized and meet the customer requirements, and it's also, if in the case of medical devices, it's safe to use on patients like you and me. Okay. Then, what does 13485 represent? It represents a comprehensive quality management system. It includes design and manufacture of medical devices. It fulfills all the regulatory. When we file a regulatory submission for a device, we want to make sure that we maintain our promises in terms of maintaining the quality. And how is it done? Through audit. And what do we audit for? The elements of ISO 13485. Okay. Now moving on. See, these are, there are guidance documents like GHTF, Global Harmonization Task Force. They are all used in addition with the standard, and they all help help us to guide what exactly the standards mean. And there's always explanation for the standard. I have a copy of the ISO 13485 right in front of me, where there are different sections like the scope. There's also the definitions, and then there's each element and how it is interpreted. Okay, so then there are also questions that you ask based on the elements of the ISO 13485. Okay, so why a standard? All countries don't have individual standards like US FDA does, and US FDA has a comparable standard which is 21 CFR 820. And then there are organizations like AAMI, which is American Association for Medical Instrumentation, ASTM, which is the test method, and then also they all adopt the ISO standards when needed. So as we know, there's just risk management standard that's adopted by everybody. Okay, and then there's also now the current trend is to go towards MDSAP, which is Medical Device Single Audit Program, which means they want to follow the same standard, and that is all in line with ISO 13, using ISO 13485, which is used by most of the world. And me being an auditor for the device industry, I know that when I audit to both ISO 13485 and US FDA 820, which means both of them, there are documents that compare the two, and for the most part, they are the same, as you'll notice from the rest of the seminar here. Okay? And ISO 13485 requires that a quality system is implemented and maintained. Say you're a small company starting up, an inventor starting up a small company. So you have to register yourself for 13485 if you want to sell your products, get it audited for 13485. And what does it require? It requires that you implement a quality system, okay? And then the specific medical device-based additions to 13485, where did it come from? It came from ISO 9001, and as you know, there are ISO 9001 is used by many customers. Okay, it's used in 157 countries, 1.9 million users are there, compared to 500,000 users for ISO 13485. But ISO 13485 is the parent of that is 9001, if you want to call it. But they've increased it, or I should say raised the bar in terms of awareness of the regulatory requirements as a management responsibility. And then they have a tighter work and environmental control for product safety, because most of the devices we are talking about for which ISO 13485 is applicable, it gets implanted in people or used on people, so product safety and efficacy is extremely important. Okay? And of course, risk management and design control are a bigger aspect in 13485 as compared to 9001. They have stringent standards for inspection, traceability, and validation, as you'll know. And also the big part is corrective action and preventive action. CAPA is a big deal in the med device industry, and so 13485 emphasizes that a lot. Okay? What are the systemic requirements? You have to buy 13485, or you may have a copy in your company, or you could, legally you have to buy 13485 from the ISO, International Standards Organization. And I'm not going to, I'll just put in the summary of each of the points, but what I'm going to do is, since you have this already, I'm going to touch upon some of the questions that will be asked for each of these. Say, for example, element 4.1 requires that companies establish a quality management system. So what am I going to look for when I'm auditing for 4.1? You need to know, are the processes needed for quality management system, are they identified? And how are the sequence and interaction of the processes determined? And then have criteria and control methods being determined? And then is information available to support the operation and monitoring of the process? So in other words, they say develop plans, then you need documented procedures. And something I like to tell everybody is, if you haven't documented, it didn't happen. If you got one thing from the seminar, you want to walk away with whatever you do in this highly regulated med device industry, you need to document it, and we need to see evidence, okay? Show evidence. So then you need a quality manual, and then it has all the procedures, and it has a scope, and then justification and exclusion. I want to take a few seconds to talk about justification and exclusion. For example, if you're a distributor,